looks as though we have settled down and everyone's going the direction they choose. My title is on 2 slides because it doesn't quite fit on the incredible font size that I have here. There are absolutely no photographs in this talk. There are no unicorns, there are no narwhals, and I will not mention the word node outside of saying I'm not going to mention the word Node.js. So, beyond that, I am Peter Higgins. I am the Dojo Toolkit project lead. I am a JavaScript engineer at Juiced, which was acquired by a company called Adconian. I work in advertising, theoretically. I'm mostly just a JavaScript hacker within the company that does whatever. I blog very, very infrequently, code, Twitter, and I'm a beer drinking expert. I did not make it to Oktoberfest with the rest of the beer drinking experts that are in this crowd, I'm sure, but those are my absolute best qualifications. And I am, besides being a regular JavaScript engineer, the coiner of the phrase, it's just JavaScript, which is less derogatory than it sounds. A lot of people, especially Java engineers and whatnot, will say, oh yeah, exactly, it's just JavaScript. It's not worth our time, it's not worth thinking about. But it's exactly the opposite, in fact. The principle is, it's JavaScript, it's lovable, it's simple, it's a great language. Probably the most compelling aspect of it is the ubiquity of it, which is huge, right? And we'll get into that a little bit later. But in the end, it's all just JavaScript. It's just bits and bytes and whatever that we've formed and mangled. It's self-healing, which is part of the elegance of the language itself. And then, of course, it's promiscuous, which is just a great word I use for something else, in fact. So I'm not going to pretend to be as knowledgeable or well-respected as Mr. Crockford, but I have my own good parts, and I don't necessarily agree with his good parts, whatever. These are my favorite good parts, right? We've got context, very, very simple context switching. We get apply and call, which is great. And then we have, coming in the spec, the kind of the bind partial argument. I call it hitch because that's what Dojo calls it. We've had this forever. AOP, aspect-oriented programming, is super, super cool. I'm sure I'm just kind of preaching to the choir at this with these bullets, but these are mine. Prototypes, of course, also pretty cool. And then module loading, which is the hottest thing that JavaScript has to offer. And then these are my bad parts. I spent 2.5 hours staring at this slide trying to come up with my least favorite parts of JavaScript. And this is all I could do. It's like the date we took from Java and then we added our own extra evil to it. It's a horrible, horrible implementation. The DOM is designed with evil, of course, which is the reason all of these libraries ultimately popped up in the first place, right? And then Crockford will tell us with and eval are allegedly, or also inherently evil. I call them allegedly evil, but they're not entirely evil. So these are the libraries that have, through the years, since 2005, kind of bubbled to the top, right? We've got Dojo, which is mine, right? And then YUI, which is another way. We've got Tom here today to tell you about YUI and Node, which is awesome. And then we have new tools and prototype, which I put on the same line because they both kind of follow the same philosophies and principles. And I ran out of bullet space on the page, so I had to put them because I wanted to include Fuse.js as well. This one doesn't exist yet. That's right. And John David Dalton may or may not tell you about this vaporware in the coming days. I'm excited to see it because John's an incredibly talented programmer, and I'm interested to see what the actual outcome of this is. Embed.js is another one that no one has ever heard of, but hopefully will be coming out very, very soon. It's from the Ixibu crew, a bunch of German kids. Yeah, I saw one hand. Okay. And then, of course, you know, jQuery, everyone's heard of that one. And then, of course, there is your own, right? Every one of you, I'm sure, has your own little miniature library thing that you've done at some point in your life that is there. So these are the libraries that exist in the mainstream, right? The ones that get talked about all the time. I'm sure I'm offending someone. Did I forget any major library that I should have? No? I don't see anyone complaining. Oh, crutch. Oh my God, how did I forget that one? It's too hard to pronounce. That's what it is. So yeah, so crutch is another one. They're even on my little task speed thing. So, and actually, the Fuse.js developer, John, made an interesting point. He actually quoted Dean Edwards in his summary that we're all ending up looking like jQuery in the end, and now it's just a pissing contest between size and speed, which I disagree with to a number of points. But it is basically that and more, and that's why it's just JavaScript, right? We're not doing anything revolutionary anymore. We've done everything, just about everything we possibly can in the browser, and then we've kind of bled into the server side now. So the first point is that it's a lovable, simple language. It's the ease in which anyone can get started is tremendous. All you have to have is the browser. Hey there, I'm coming back. Show of hands. Anybody want me to just talk about Node for the rest of the talk? Yeah? All right, nice. I'll just leave that there, and I'll try not to move too much. Actually, that's probably a bad idea. So, lovable, simple language. It's beautiful. And in the last couple of years, we've seen millions and millions of, I just say millions because it's a great number, right? 11 billion new developers coming into this world. Quick show of hands, who is relatively new to JavaScript and just here because it just penetrated the server officially? Nice, one guy, nice. Somebody buy that guy a beer, he's got a lot to learn. We are a beer-drinking, wonderful crowd of developers. So I always say to people, you should not use a library. You should learn JavaScript first. You should have some fundamental understanding of JavaScript and the DOM before you get into any of this stuff. And it's evident in the various IRC support forums and dev channels that a lot of people don't. And it's scary. And this is the next generation of developers that are coming up to us. And it's our job as more experienced developers to stop them from doing stupid things and be very, very vocal about it. We should know enough about JavaScript to have very strong feelings against it. We should know what we don't like and what we do like and what are the positive and negative, whatever. We should learn to supplement those parts, right? We should know how to abstract around something that's broken and fix it for ourselves. And once you've done that, it's not so much a crutch anymore as it is a tool. This is giving me difficulty. This is okay. Sorry. Don't be afraid of the word prototype, right? That's one of the most exciting parts, or is one of my bullets for why it's so cool. Don't be afraid of it. If you don't know that $function is an alias to $prototype, you should quit or find someone that does and have them explain to you how wonderful a world this is in the end. So, promiscuous, loose typing. I don't want anyone else's languages coming into my language. I don't enjoy, this is me personally, right? I don't enjoy the idea of needing to know that it's a number or needing to know that it's a string or forcing that on anybody. I can do this myself. I know I've written the function, I've written the APIs, I've written the RPC. It's just JSON, and if it fits in JSON, it can come through and we can mix it and match it and do whatever we want. So it's a very promiscuous language. It just kind of allows you to do whatever. It is also self-healing. Anything that's wrong with it, we can fix. Probably the most evident thing is, this is my favorite, absolute, topmost favorite thing to do in JavaScript. Basic AOP. Is anyone not entirely comfortable with the idea of call and apply? Nice. I should have phrased that differently. Can I see a show of hands of people that are entirely comfortable with call and apply? All right. Because you know what it's going to say, like, yeah, I don't know how to do anything. But it's not, that was horribly mean of me, but it's really, call and apply are what make JavaScript very, very, very simple to fix. So here, I've decided that the old function in whatever namespace is terrible. Incidentally, it's not terrible enough that I'm just not recalling it later on, but the point is before and after this old function apply, I can do whatever the hell I want to the arguments, to the scope. I don't have to apply it in that context. This is a wonderful thing. So it's self-healing, we can fix it. There's nothing wrong with it. And what happens is we get into a philosophical debate about how to fix it. And instead of, there's basically two ways to fix these things, is we can fix them by wrapping them, or we can fix them by extending native prototypes. Or we can, by extending or by fixing the language itself. So perfect example is we need a trim function. A lot of implementations don't have a trim function, which is, speaking to the server side, we have these modern rendering engines or modern interpreters on the server side, but for the rest of us that are doing client-side stuff, we still don't. So do we have a string trim? If we do, let's use the native. And then the fun stuff down here is all, again, up for discussion, right? There's 100 million ways. We got Steve Leviathan, I believe, doing huge performance tests on what's the fastest string trim, where we can't really defer to faster CPU cycles in the end. It's like, oh, great, it's like our processes are going to get huge. We can do whatever we want as long as it's, does what it says it's going to do. This falls apart in the whole philosophical bit is that what if somebody put a string prototype trim on there and it was faulty? What if it didn't really trim, and what if they just picked that name and put it on string? We're all screwed, because then my library instantly becomes broken. I actually chose my library specifically too, because I wanted the most generic library there could be, and I want to steal the Google searching for my library. Context manipulation, right? Same exact pattern. We have bind in the upcoming ECMA, which is awesome. But in reality, we won't have it in all of the 150 billion or 1.5 billion implementations that already exist. So what do we do about that? Do we cram it on the function? Do we cram it on the function prototype and hope that our implementation is right, or do we wrap it as we're doing here? The question being, bonus points. I'll buy a beer for whomever can tell me why this is wrong. I'll wait. No? It is not two-spec bind. All right? So partial arguments. The rest of the arguments that you're allowed to pass to the actual binding are carried along as the first arguments to whatever. So we need to call Array.prototype slice in the context of whatever the arguments to get them, and then shift them off two because we're using two functions. So, and then again, we're doing that. How many times do you want to type out Array.prototype slice, call, whatever? You need a two-array function. We need a basic two-array function that just wraps that, so we can pass it arguments or whatever. Again, so we have my library, two-array equals function, array, index, whatever. So we should do that. We supplement it for the rest of the insane browsers that do not have this, and then we've maintained API compatibility. And this is kind of abstract. It's like I haven't told you why anything sucks yet, but I'm hoping to set up something right here. It's very, very easy to abuse JavaScript, which is with these 11 billion new hordes of developers that are coming in. I keep seeing code that looks like this, and it makes me want to quit, really. Like, I don't enjoy it, and we need to speak to the people that are doing this. It's our job, it's our responsibility as more talented JavaScript developers to stop people from doing this. Of course, being that the selector is probably the most inefficient way you can do this. You're registering a click function, and then repeating the selection 3 times to do this, and then triggering the click function, which then goes back through a bunch of work to just call the function really that you just set up. So in light of performance, I wouldn't say that, to do that. This is how you could write that same easy, ugly code in Dojo, for what it's worth. It's just as bad. Just as bad. So why not just do it like this, right? We have a function. It's all functional programming, whatever. Make a function that does some shit. bar clicker, we bind the function to the click event, and then if we need to call it, we just call it. We avoid all the overhead, we avoid all of the work, we're avoiding the triple lookup, the DOM lookup 3 times to do this. Pretty basic stuff, but you would be surprised at how prominent bad code is. It's like the view source. The new view source of the web is look at the script. The markup can look like whatever it does. You know, if you've ever seen something that like Jetty output from its JSPs or Java template, like it's all just disgusting markup. So we're beyond actually trying to read this like beautiful semantic markup, and we're getting into the JavaScript as like, what does the actual rendered DOM of this look like? Like Firebug formats it for me nicely. That's what I actually look at. So the new source is look at the script, and then you can make fun of it. And then you should be able to get that information back to whomever actually wrote it and say, wow, you're doing it terribly wrong. So that's our responsibility. We need to, despite which library it is, we need to tell people how to do it right and the importance of doing it right. So the next point being its ubiquity is part of what makes it so great, right? We have the 1.5 billion implementations of this, and back, you know, it's been a trend. You read /dot, but can it run Linux, right? It's anytime a new device ever comes out is, but can it run Linux? And the answer is, but it already runs JavaScript. So everything comes with the browser. Everything is pure JavaScript ready in some way or another, right? So the device presentation is, we have desktop browsers, we have mobile browsers, we have devices, we have any kind of device eventually has a browser in it, right? On the server side, we've always had Rhino, right? So server JavaScript is not a new thing. It's just a really popular thing. And Rhino was horribly broken for a long time, but it's always been there. And then, you know, V8, SpiderMonkey. This is why server-side JavaScript is becoming mainstream, right? V8, I told myself I wouldn't say Node, but Narwhal, of course, we've got Narwhal as well back there. It's huge, it's everywhere. And then the future browsers, right? Like, wouldn't it be great if you could get a ground notification through some like JSON RPC type thing when your laundry's done? And instead of like a bell, it's like, hey, growl, awesome. The usefulness of this in this simple, the JSON, which, you know, has its origins in JavaScript, is an awesome data transport, and it's native to all these things that already speak it. So it is trivial to make my Palm phone aware of my washing machine through just a few lines of JavaScript and through whatever it is, right? And I'm not going to make any friends from here on out, is where it officially goes downhill. I say that CommonJS is piggybacking. It's piggybacking on the work that the client-side developers have been doing for the past, I'd say, 7 years now. 7, whatever. Modules, we should be fighting for that in the language and not so much worried about the implementation that we're working with. I honestly believe that CommonJS kind of disregarded the browser and that it's being done by server-side developers and with no regard for the initial, the bread and butter, where the ubiquity of JavaScript came from in the first place, mostly related to modules. There's no DOM on the server side as well, which is, see, exactly. It's the bad parts, back to the bad parts about JavaScript, it's the DOM implementation was written medieval, and we can all agree on that, but it's through what we've learned and through research and actual practical application, we've come down to a single reduced set of APIs that we're tolerant of, right? Like, place it here, use a reference insert before, insert after, destroy, whatever. We don't have to think about all of the weird abstracts and the indices and stuff. So the DOM is evil. There's no DOM in server. That's beautiful. What do we do with all these tools that are not DOM related? We need better tooling. And that's where CommonJS comes in, but they're not actually providing implementations. They're just kind of saying how it should work. it's a bit late, I think. I think that we've done this enough in the client side that a lot of the client side implementations for pure JavaScript things should just kind of bubble up anyway. And unfortunately, only time will tell, right? CommonJS is too late to the game with regard to client side, and then it's too early in the game with regard to server side. So more time will tell. Only more bike shedding will get us to the point where we can all actually agree. I would love to actually agree on anything in a language context. And we actually have them. We've actually already agreed on this to a degree, or at least to the point where we've taken this implementation, whatever it is, the MDC is pretty definitive spec as far as server-side, as far as the language goes, right? And so, for instance, the arrays, Array.prototype, it's always been there. It's showing up in newer things, but again, we have the same problem. It's only showing up in the newer things, which are not the browsers that we already have. The Internet Explorer, if you can get something like Chrome in, so Alex basically gave up on the client side. He admit defeat, I don't know, whatever it is, he decided that he wanted to go forward with this, like, okay, I'm tired of fixing for IE, let's just fix IE. Chrome is, if you're not aware of it, you should definitely take a look at it. But it implements, same JavaScript interpreters in IE. So array, for each map, filter. But we're not even doing it to spec. None of us are. None of the libraries that I listed, with the exception of the vaporware that may or may not walk over sparse arrays properly, as says the spec. But then that's just another point that maybe we don't need to walk over sparse arrays. I've never hit a thing. But so I've never hit a use case where I needed to use a sparse array. But the spec says, so the standards say. So does CommonJS say that? Does CommonJS say we should fight the ECMA committee and say, like, do they speak as a unified voice to the ECMA committee? Because they're the ones that are ultimately deciding the fate of our language. It would, nice to have kind of thing. So what's the answer, right? That's kind of an open question. Any suggestions? I do not mind at all interruption and questions and criticism immediately. No? No one has an answer? Good. All right. None of us have an answer. The answer is, as I've shown with the My Library, right, is just write a function, an API, for yourself that fixes it wherever you want. Defer to the natives, whatever, and then you can handle sparse arrays if you want to follow the spec. I think such a trivial point, but it kind of reappears in everything. So, and then we've got jQuery map versus the map on the selections. There are lots of fun things that go in there, and I'm just going to say that it offends my senses. It hurts every time I go to use jQuery map, if I ever do. But at the same time, the dojo map, we do this thing where you can dojo map an array, and then we actually name in the function callbacks, item index array, so you can reference them within the string. And ultimately, under the covers, it's just going through a new function, like new function, whatever. But people like this. And we actually had to take a lot of it out internally so that we could run in things like air, which don't allow new functions or eval being done. So we don't use it internally. It's there for legacy reasons. I am of the opinion that we should just go back to spec and forget the syntactic sugar. So, but there's a lot wrong here. Portability, right? So here's the different ways. I didn't know the API for fuse, so I just called it win. But I'm assuming it's going to be spec standard base blah 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 item index access to the original array and allowing a set context. The only one that does not allow you to set context is jQuery. And all of the rest of them do this whole item index thing, and it's really great. So, but we have the one wildly popular one that diverges from this. So do we all diverge from this? Is that the right answer? Or do we wait on them to fix their implementation? Fortunately, it's called each, so they could implement a for each and provide it, but they haven't. So the point being that if you use the native array.forEach anywhere in your library, say prototype, we've got the Andrew DuPont over here. If you have something that's already extending the native, it's mindlessly simple to go back and forth, but from server writing this, like you can extend all the prototypes you want, to using it on the client side. Same for Dojo. It's if you happen to have Dojo in your server environment, which it's perfectly suited for, the API is the same. There's no different thinking you have to do. You don't have to jump back and forth between, oh, okay, jQuery each 1, 2, 3, oh, it's this within this, I lose the ability to set the context, or, oh, okay, I'll just use the native for each here, but then I'm not able to load this into the browser unless the natives have been supplemented, and it just turns into a nightmare. So, again, we should follow the standards, we should follow the spec. Yeah, prototype bind, we all provide this. Simple example, this counter plus equals how much? And then in native, more in prototype way, I'm only actually assuming new. I'm not sure they do the kerning. But we all basically follow the spec, right? So we have a new function, object inc, which is that function. We're going to bind it to the scope of object so that we don't have to worry about the context that we're calling it in. And then we're going to increment it by 5. So anytime we call pfn, it's going to increment by 5. And then same with Dojo, Dojo hitch. We do this another thing that I'd love to see in the spec, right? Object inc, quotes on inc, which means exactly the same thing, the inc function of object. Add it 5. We do it actually backwards because of the way hitch works. We do it scope or context function arguments. jQuery proxy is, I'm not sure if it's new in 1.4 or if they just happened to discover it in 1.4, but I've been filing tickets saying that jQuery needed some kind of context manipulation, and their answer was proxy. I don't understand the name of it, but naming stuff is hard. So they have object inc. It also doesn't curry arguments, and then they actually do it kind of to the spec when it's just direct function references. So that's great, but this is important in JavaScript, and we need to make sure that everyone is able to easily control their context. And if you're not missing the point, it's probably not your fault. It's just that I've not been clear yet on anything. I'm just kind of rambling. I'm actually not usually this sober because it's very, very early in the morning, and these JSConfs, if you've not made it to one before, are pretty epic with the beer. So I'm not being clear. Your library still sucks, right? I'm a fist-shaking, grumpy old man. I inherited this from Alex Russell the moment that he kind of transferred leadership of Dojo to me. I actually instantly grew gray hair in my beard. It was a very, very sad day. And I understand now. I understand why he's the grumpy old ranting man that he is. I would love to not be that way. But the point is, like, there really is no compelling reason. Like, despite all of your flaws, all of your library's flaws, whatever it is that you're using, there's no compelling reason for you not to use it, especially if you already know the APIs. It's a developer cost thing at some point. It's how proficient can you get in one thing, provided you understand the underpinnings of what it's providing, of what it's changing from the spec. You should be able to go to a different library and pick up the patterns that the library presents, but understand under the covers, it's all just context switching and whatever. I would greatly appreciate if every one of you never, ever, ever put more than one library in your page. If you have more than one library in your page, you're doing it wrong, or the things that you are using are not agnostic enough to just supplement. You should either know how to write whatever little, we'll call it a plugin, for lack of a better term, module, you should either know and have enough skill to write it, or at least port another implementation to your favorite library, or pick a different library. Non-trivial tasks is that's what they're there for. It is a crutch, but at the same time, it's a crutch to help you get over the hump, over the whatever the barrier to entry is for. Excuse me. Wow. Portability. Sorry about that. So, rather than cool. So rather than develop your own library, which is a perfectly valid thing, especially if you have a team, it defers the development cost, right? It's not only a crutch to help you along, to help you through, it's more like a wheelchair. So you can just kind of cruise along and not have to put up too much effort until you hit stairs. And that's actually rather difficult if you've never been in a wheelchair. So you don't have to worry about the development costs. You just know that whatever it is just sitting there working for you. It's the open source many eyes thing. The same principle in Linux or any really open source thing is that if there's a bug, we're going to find it by sheer number that is doing this. Battle tested. We're all pounding on this all the time. So all of a sudden, any bugs is provided the library is receptive to your fixes. As long as it's an open development cycle, you can provide these fixes. You can provide patches. GitHub pull requests, I guess, is the new cool thing to do. And that's great. And then you have the common consistent APIs throughout your library that you can use and build on and you're used to, right? So I've decided at this point, I had another 15 to 20 slides lined up in the last night. I decided I wanted to change topics. I totally tangent. So I propose a new thing called CommonBrowserJS. Right? So let's take what we've learned as, I would say, library author. There are other library authors here, and this may be speaking directly to you. I would like to see that we take what we've learned over the years and reduce it to the least common denominator. Find something that we can all build upon that is the supplement to the language in the browser that we've wanted and that we've needed, right? So no magic, no syntactic sugar, nothing, just pure supplemental fixes. Provide bind, provide a function, something that we can all agree on the implementation. It shouldn't be that hard. The hardest part about it is naming shit. That's the hardest part. We've already got all the code. If you look at the code of these libraries, ultimately we're all doing the same thing. In our HTML creation area, we're using DOM fragments, right? John did a bunch of research on that, and everyone kind of went along with it. It turns out it's pretty fast, and that's great. So we're doing that. Array stuff, that's great. We've all kind of like passively agreed that we don't care about sparse arrays. So we don't need to worry about that spec, but we still need an iterator idea that we can all use, and then whatever. So no UA sniffs. We've decided, we collectively, very kind of forcefully, have decided that UA sniffing is bad. It used to be the end-all, be-all, and actually, I don't know, that's kind of a chicken and the egg argument, right? It started with, are we Internet Explorer or are we Netscape? Or are we Mozilla? And then, okay, so Internet Explorer now became more standards-based, so they're going to throw Mozilla in there, so we start taking the actual working paths, and that, was a big monkey wrench for everyone. So we need to get away from that. We need to actually look at the features that are present in the environment that we're in. And we need to pick a module system. We need to actually implement, it's actually been implemented, depending on what spec in the module system in CommonJS we've chosen, but there's a project called, there are probably 3 competing module loaders for JavaScript. Require.js, Lab.js, and Steel.js are probably the most common that we've heard of. Require.js is inspired by Dojo in the sense that the author who wrote it wrote also our module loading. We've had module loading for, it was probably one of the first things that we implemented to have. Now the community is catching up and saying, yes, we actually do need modules. Like our application needs are getting a little bit higher than injecting script tags and continuing on. And we have dependencies and we have these things. So we need Require.js or something similar that is a very fundamental baseline thing that we can all kind of agree on and build on. And it needs to be able to load CommonJS spec. Like there's nothing wrong with the CommonJS spec necessarily, except that in the client side, we've all understood and known to understand that it's asynchronous. And the best way to do it is asynchronously. It fits perfectly in with progressive enhancement. Like at some point, these modules will be ready, and at some point, they will do something to my DOM. We have the legacy synchronous loader that we use in Dojo for development, but that's just because we don't change APIs. So come to Dojo 2.0, we're probably going to adopt the Require.js pattern, and it's going to be completely asynchronous, which, again, now this is the third time I've said node. Do I get tokens or something every time I say node? I could say HTML5 a couple times. That would be cool. I'm just trying to go for, buzzwords, get everyone excited about buzz. And then try to be agnostic, right? Like I'm kind of anecdotal. I work now, when I changed from Juice. Juice is an entirely server-side Dojo app that's been in development for 2.5 years. It uses Rhino because that was what was there at the time. So we've got a beautiful server-side framework. It uses Dojo's SMD system, which is another interesting spec that would be SMD would be an interesting thing to put into the CommonJS world because it's basically just RPC calls based on a JSON definition. And then Juiced was purchased by an advertising company, and I kind of went out of the public-facing client-side development into all these nasty internal applications that were using old versions of jQuery and YUI and sometimes prototype all mixed in. And it was not pretty. It was just hodgepodge, very, very sad. So I ended up porting a bunch of Dojo code to jQuery so that I could use them. And then when looking at the Dojo code, I was realizing that the only thing that the Dojo code was doing was the common things. We had a couple isArray checks, and we had package system. And that was it. So I stripped those 2 lines out, and then all of a sudden I have a jQuery plugin. So I have a repository on my GitHub called Bloody jQuery Plugins, which are just code I put there because I was frustrated that I actually had to take the time to port this because I should just be able to load them. Because it's nothing. It was a date packaging or a date addition thing because working in dates is disgusting in JavaScript. So we have like date add, and you add to a date object, and it's very, very simple. So I like that, and I'm used to that API. So that's what I'm proposing, right, to a degree. Small problems are easy. We've got the standards, we've got the list of stuff, we've got what we've actually done, and where do we go from here, right? Where we go from here is getting everyone to agree on doing it and building off of a common thing. And then figuring out what the important parts are. So we have modularity, which is something that Dojo's already addressed. It's something that CommonJS has already addressed. It's actually kind of ironic, though, that the one thing about Node, again, the one thing about Node is that the only thing about it that is synchronous is the require system, which falls apart in the browser world, so you have no portability there. So stability, we need to agree on a way to handle deprecation, regressions, and some kind of sane versioning that can be adopted by other people if we're wanting to use this as a common language or a common foundation supplement to the language. And then localization and internationalization, especially here in Germany, right? Like everything's America-centric, or at least it seems. Most of the sites I visit are, hey, everything is comma separated with dots for the period or dots for the cents, which is just simply not the case. And this stuff doesn't happen by magic, right? Someone is actually formatting these numbers or converting them somehow, and it's not a small problem to solve. And we need to agree on a way to define localized or internationalized resources, and then a way to handle localization within the language itself. So I made a first pass. 2 minutes, great. I made a first pass. I didn't expect to go this long. I wanted to actually talk about this a little more. Has.js. I've been working in a Dojo branch for some time now, which is pure feature detection. We got rid of all the browser sniffs. It's not quite complete yet, but in doing this, talking to John and other developers, it would be great if we could share these tests and share these things that we've learned and share these things that they're skipping around. So the hardest part would be naming them. It's basically feature detect some constant name, like does by ID work on forms with name or whatever. So it's like, what do we do? What do we do? So the API of this is not as important on converging test implementations, right? But I want a common test implementation. I want to do this. It's an open proposal to anybody that wants to jump in on this. I want to start a new base library that pure feature detection and these common shims that we're using, so we can all go from there. But again, naming shit is hard. So, and then this one is for Aluni up there, who was expecting me to, on random intervals, say that Dojo already did it. Dojo already has done that, and this is, or at least everything that I feel is necessary. I've stolen things from Prototype, I've stolen things from jQuery in my own implementations of things, but really, we probably have. So if it's a JavaScript question, at least look at the implementation, and maybe we can converge on a different name of things. So actually, I was hoping to have a whole lot more discussion, kind of open-ended talking, so I'm going to skip this slide real quickly, and thank you for coming out.